Don't skip it because the interesting part is waiting for you at the end. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel. Like, if you like listening to horror stories.
It was late spring and the air in Riceville, a sleepy town nestled against the dense whispering pines of the Blackwood Forest, carried the faint promise of summer. Ethan Caldwell, 28, and his best friend Marcus Mack Thompson, 29, were itching to escape the grind of their dead-end office jobs. When their company announced a week-long shutdown, the two didn't hesitate. They pooled their cash, rented a creaky 3-story Victorian villa on the outskirts of town, and loaded up Ethan's beat-up Jeep with enough Riceville lager to drown a small army. The villa, known as Pinewood, was a relic, sagging porches peeling paint and windows that rattled in their frames. But to Ethan and Mac, it was freedom, a place to cut loose, forget their responsibilities, and maybe, just maybe, feel alive again. They arrived at Pinewood just after dawn, the forest's mist curling around the villa like ghostly fingers. Ethan, with his tousled brown hair and restless energy, hauled their cooler inside while Mac, broad-shouldered and perpetually grinning, scouted the place. The interior smelled of mildew and old wood, with faded wallpaper curling at the edges and furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched since the Nixon administration. Still, the creaky charm only fueled their excitement. "This place is perfect," Mac declared, cracking open a beer before they'd even unpacked. Ethan laughed, already feeling the weight of the world slip away. Their first day was pure, reckless abandon. They trekked into the forest, fishing rods in hand, and set up by a glassy pond that reflected the towering pines. The fish weren't biting, but it didn't matter. They swapped stories, roasted each other's lousy casts, and let the sun warm their faces. Ethan felt a flicker of something he hadn't in years, joy untainted by the grind. Mac, ever the optimist, kept the mood light, his booming laugh echoing through the trees. By dusk, they were back at Pinewood, sprawled in the second-floor master bedroom, a cavernous space with a sagging 4-poster bed, a cracked mirror, and a single warped window that overlooked the forest's edge. Beers were popped, chips were spilled, and their banter flowed as freely as the lager. As midnight crept closer, the room grew hazy with alcohol and laughter. Ethan's head buzzed, his limbs heavy, and Mac was slurring through a half-baked story about a high school prank gone wrong. The world felt soft, warm, like they could just melt into the floor and sleep forever. But then a sound, sharp, deliberate, cut through the fog. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the window, a rhythmic, insistent knock that seemed to pulse in time with Ethan's heartbeat. He froze, his beer bottle halfway to his lips. "You hear that?" he mumbled, his voice thick with booze. Mac, sprawled across the bed, squinted toward the window. "Probably just a branch or something," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. The tapping continued, steady, unyielding, like someone or something was demanding to be let in. Ethan's skin prickled. They were on the second floor. No tree was close enough to touch that window. He forced a laugh, trying to shake the unease. "Maybe it's a raccoon with a grudge." Max snorted, but the sound didn't stop. Tap, tap, tap. It was louder now, more urgent, and Ethan's buzz was fading fast, replaced by a cold knot in his gut. He stood, swaying slightly, and peered at the window. Beyond the glass was nothing but inky blackness, the kind that swallowed light and reason. "This ain't right, man," he whispered. Mac, never one to back down, rolled his eyes and staggered to his feet. "What, you scared of a little noise? Bet it's just some dumb bird." He lumbered toward the window, his heavy footsteps shaking the floorboards. Ethan wanted to stop him, to yell that this wasn't a game, but his tongue felt glued to the roof of his mouth. Mac reached the window, raised his fist, and pounded on the glass. The tapping stopped instantly, leaving a silence so thick it felt like a physical weight. "See? Nothing," Mac said, turning back with a smug grin. But before Ethan could relax, it started again. Tap, tap, tap. Faster, harder, like whatever was out there was angry now. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Mac, don't!" he started, but Mac was already losing it. "God damn it!" he roared, snatching his empty beer bottle and hurling it at the wall beside the window. The glass shattered, shards glittering on the floor, and the tapping stopped again. For a moment, they just stood there, breathing hard, the room spinning around them. "Give me another beer, Ethan," Mac said, his voice rough, almost desperate. Ethan nodded, fumbling for the cooler, but before he could grab a bottle, the sound returned, not tapping this time, but a furious, relentless pounding. It was as if a dozen fists were hammering the window, the glass rattling in its frame, threatening to explode inward. Ethan's blood turned to ice. He stumbled back, his mind screaming, "Run, run, run," but his legs wouldn't move. Mac, though, was all rage. He charged the window, yanked it open with a grunt, and leaned out into the night, shouting, "Who the hell's out there? Come on!" Ethan's vision blurred. The room tilted, and the last thing he saw was Mac's silhouette against the open window, his voice echoing into the void. Then darkness swallowed him whole. When Ethan woke, sunlight stabbed through his eyelids and his mouth tasted like ash. He was sprawled on the bedroom floor, his head throbbing, his clothes reeking of stale beer. The room was a wreck, empty bottles, crushed chip bags, and the glint of broken glass by the window. The window itself was still open, letting in a breeze that carried the sharp scent of pine. For a moment, Ethan thought it had all been a dream, a drunken nightmare. Then he remembered Mac. He stumbled downstairs, his heart pounding, and found the front door ajar. Outside on the dew-soaked grass lay Mac, motionless, his neck twisted at an unnatural angle, his eyes staring blankly at the sky. Ethan's knees buckled. He retched, the world spinning, and barely registered his own shaking hands as he dialed 911. The Riceville police arrived quickly, their radios crackling in the morning stillness. Ethan tried to explain the tapping, the pounding, the open window, but his words came out jumbled, soaked in panic and alcohol. He pointed to Mac's shirt, where a stark black handprint stood out against the fabric like it had been burned into the cotton. "You see that, right? The handprint?" he begged. But the officers just exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. They chalked it up to a drunken accident, a fall from the window, and loaded Mac's body into a van. Ethan stood there, numb as the taillights disappeared down the dirt road. "You saw it, didn't you? The handprint." The voice was low, almost a whisper, and Ethan spun around to find a stranger standing at the edge of the lawn. The man was young, maybe mid-20s, with wild dark hair and a single, oddly upright strand that seemed to defy gravity. His eyes were sharp, piercing, like he could see straight through Ethan's soul. "Yeah," Ethan stammered, his voice barely audible. "What the hell was that?" The man stepped closer, his expression grim. "Name's Jasper Rice. Let's just say I deal with things most folks don't want to know about." He glanced at the villa, then back at Ethan. "You and your friend stirred up something bad, real bad." Jasper's words sent a shiver down Ethan's spine, but he couldn't look away. There was something magnetic about the man, something that demanded attention. Jasper listened as Ethan recounted the night, his face darkening with every detail. When Ethan finished, Jasper rubbed his chin, muttering, "Yup, you've got yourself a Saltwraith." Seeing Ethan's confusion, Jasper explained, his voice low and urgent. "It's an old spirit, older than this town. Likes to haunt places like this, isolated, forgotten. At night, it hangs outside windows, tapping, waiting. If you open the window, it grabs you, pulls you out, and..." He gestured toward the spot where Mac had lain. "But if you ignore it after 3 sets of taps, it'll break through and scare you to death, literally." Ethan's stomach churned. "Why us? What did we do?" His voice cracked, a mix of fear and guilt. Jasper's eyes softened just for a moment. "Ain't about what you did. It's about what you saw, that handprint on your friend. Only certain folks can see it. Folks the Saltwraith marks as its next target." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You've got 3 nights before it comes for you." Ethan's legs nearly gave out. 3 nights? I can't. There's gotta be a way to stop it." His voice rose, frantic, and Jasper held up a hand, calm but firm. "There is, but it ain't easy." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, cloudy glass vial filled with a silvery liquid. "This is consecrated brine. Old recipe, older than the wraith itself. On the 3rd night, when the tapping hits its 3rd round, you open the window and throw this at it. 1 drop, and it's gone for good." He pressed the vial into Ethan's trembling hand. $2, cash. Ethan fumbled for his wallet, handing over the coins without question. The vial felt cold, heavier than it should, and he clutched it like a lifeline. "You're sure this'll work?" he asked, his voice small. Jasper's smile was thin, almost pitying. "If you do it right." With that, he turned and vanished into the trees, leaving Ethan alone with the villa's looming shadow. The next 2 days were torture. Ethan stayed in the villa, too scared to leave, too stubborn to run. The place felt different now, darker, like the walls were watching him. He paced the 2nd-floor bedroom, the vial never leaving his grip, and jumped at every creak and groan of the old house. Sleep was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Mac's lifeless face, that black handprint seared into his mind. By the 3rd night, Ethan was a wreck, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking, his nerves frayed to threads. Midnight came, and the villa was deathly silent. Ethan stood in the center of the bedroom, the vial slick with sweat in his palm. The window loomed before him, its glass reflecting the dim glow of a single lamp. He checked his watch. 12:01. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the room was holding its breath. Then it came. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was soft at first, almost polite, but it sent a jolt of terror through Ethan's body. He gripped the vial tighter, his breath hitching. 1. The tapping stopped, and the silence was worse. Ethan's eyes darted to the window, but he saw nothing, just darkness, endless and hungry. Minutes crawled by, each one an eternity, then tap, tap, tap. Louder this time, more insistent, like the thing outside was growing impatient. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. 2. He backed toward the bed, his legs trembling, and whispered to himself, "Just one more. Just one more." The vial was his only hope, his only way out. He tried to picture the Saltwraith, some skeletal eyeless thing clinging to the window, its claws scraping the glass. But his mind recoiled from the image. The clock ticked on and Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. Tap, tap, tap. The third round hit like a thunderclap, the window shaking in its frame. Ethan's breath caught. Now he lunged forward, fumbling with the vial's cork, his fingers clumsy with panic. The tapping grew frantic, a relentless drumbeat, and Ethan's mind screamed that he was too slow, too late. He yanked the window open, the cold night air rushing in, and hurled the vial's contents into the darkness. The liquid glittered briefly in the lamplight before vanishing into the void. Ethan stood there, chest heaving, staring into the night. The tapping stopped. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of earth and decay. Nothing moved. No claws, no glowing eyes, no monstrous shape. Just silence. Ethan's knees buckled and he sank to the floor, a shaky laugh escaping his lips. "I did it," he whispered. "I fucking did it." The next morning, Jasper Rice returned to Pinewood, his boots crunching on the gravel drive. He'd meant to check on Ethan, maybe offer a few words of reassurance, but as he approached, his stomach dropped. Police tape cordoned off the villa and officers milled about, their faces grim. Jasper pushed through the crowd, his heart sinking as he caught sight of Ethan's body on the grass, his neck twisted, his eyes wide with terror. Beside him lay the empty vial, its glass glinting in the sun. Jasper's jaw tightened. He overheard the cops muttering about another drunk accident, but he knew better. Ethan had thrown the brine just as instructed. The wraith should have been banished. Unless... Jasper's eyes flicked to the window above, its frame weathered but intact. A horrible realization hit him. The Saltwraith hadn't been below the window waiting to be splashed. It had been above, clinging to the eaves, out of reach of the brine's arc. Jasper turned away, his face pale. The villa stood silent, its windows dark, but he could feel it watching, waiting for the next fool to step inside. Somewhere in the forest, the Saltwraith lingered, its hunger unquenched, its next mark already chosen. And in the shadows of Pinewood, the tapping would begin again.